we were doing this discussion, and he's like, "Hey, Mr. Eggleston." I was like, "Yeah," and he goes, "Are heroes shit?"
Welcome to the Nerd News Podcast, starring Tyson Cox and Tyler Waltz.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Nerd News, where we bring you the latest and greatest in the nerd world. My name is Tyler Waltz, and with me, as always,
Tyson Cox, baby.
Yeah, and today is part 2 of having the amazing Cavin with us. Cavin, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Cavin Eggleston.
Yeah,
I like how you introduced you like you're a magician.
Yeah, I feel like the amazing Jonathan's replacement.
I mean, I gave you a deck of cards for a reason, but that's fine. You don't have to do it.
Amazing Jonathan can't be here tonight because of the dead. We got the amazing Cavin.
We got the pretty good Cavin. Give it up for
A relatively solid Cavin.
amazing is copywritten. So
Yep. But yeah, no. So we're here to bring you all the fun stuff in the nerd news, news world.
shout out to Defense Mechanism for that wonderful theme song of ours.
Yeah, always fantastic, always fun to listen to. But today we talked about like Pokemon and God of War and stuff on Tuesday, so go check out that episode.
God, that was fun.
Today we're going to talk about some stuff that I'm extraordinarily excited to talk about with Cavin because it's some of his favorite stuff, and come to find out, him and I have the same comic book series as like our favorite. So yeah, do you want to start talking about the Watchmen? Because I'm so excited to hear your perspective.
Yeah, it feels weird to be on Nerd News and be like, let's talk about things from 1986.
Yeah.
That feels...
Well, don't worry, it's probably getting remade soon anyways.
Yeah. Oh, God, which would be hilarious, because every time something gets remade by Alan Moore, I think he gets a little bit closer to, like, releasing the spell that's going to end the world.
Oh, yeah.
So that's why he's like, the pandemic was, you guys were pissing me off.
Yeah, he's like...
The interviews with him where he finds out, like, you know, the TV show and the movie, he's just not into it. He's never into it.
Yeah, no. Well, because like, if you've had your like work fucked over that bad,
Yeah.
like you if you know that you somehow were tangentially responsible for making the movie that caused Sean Connery to just be like, I'm done acting.
Yeah.
You probably feel a way when you find out they're making another movie based on your work.
Was that
Yeah.
what, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, it's all right. It's not like it was a big loss.
Hey, he picked that over being Gandalf. Okay, that's my favorite.
Oh, I
trivia
forgot
fact.
about that.
My favorite trivia is he does interviews. He's like, sometimes you should just hit a woman.
Yeah, right. And people were like, we're going to miss him so much.
Yeah.
It was such a treat to have.
It was him and Jerry Lee Lewis and Elvis should all hang out.
But yeah, the Watchmen.
Yeah,
Fuck you, heroes.
actually
Feels appropriate, yeah.
Yeah, it fits. You just never have heroes, never trust anyone.
Never.
Yeah, so 1986 is Watchmen. It comes out at this time where like America is just kind of done with the system, with the establishment. And Alan Moore and Frank Miller kind of bring about this grim, dark future for comic books. Like, I mean, I think almost everything you can see the next 20 years out of comic books is just trying to like emulate, or like even still part of the conversation, reject what those two did in those works. You know, Frank Miller, I think, holds up less well because his is just like, well, what if Batman were a fascist and we were cool with it?
Oh, yeah.
But
Was that a specific series of Batman? Or was it...
Dark Knight Returns.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't-
Yeah. Oh, have you never? Okay, so it's a really great one, but it's an older Batman.
Yeah.
Coming back. And he basically like ends up taking over Gotham. Kind of, after he beats up Superman and fakes his death and stuff.
So his does it have like the same mask, but with just like a little thing here?
No, that's like his comeback moment is like he shaves his mustache.
Oh wow! Oh
Yeah.
It's right before all of the dark comic book themes just were trying to be edgy.
yeah.
Like, it was like that, Superman, those two kind of got it pretty good, and then everything outside was like, okay, we get it. You have an edgy version of your hero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Watchmen though is this one that I ended up teaching it in school. I taught a class called Modern American Mythology, which was comic books, and we always capped it off by reading Watchmen.
Yeah.
And it was always interesting because it was the only time in my school I've ever had to send a permission slip home for like a book.
Oh, yeah.
And it was weird because it wasn't like the attempt of Sally Jupiter. It's not any of the violence in it. It's not like a guy kills 3 million people and I have to send home a letter. They're like, There's a
Blue, is it the blue wiener?
there's a weenie.
There's a blue wiener.
See a weenie in it, and
Yeah.
you're like, cool. I have to provide an alternate novel because your kid can't handle a rendered dick.
Yeah.
It's strange that half the class can't look down.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Well, at one point he is like 30 feet tall. I understand that's
okay.
proportionally
Yeah.
daunting.
Yeah. Started a lot of fetishes.
Yeah, I mean, but or confirmed a couple.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. My first year teaching, I was teaching that book, and I remember there's a 3-way scene in it, kinda, and it's actually like for the point of the novel where it happens, it's this fascinating scene where Dr. Manhattan, who's this invincible blue god that can basically control all matter, is I don't know why I'm explaining this to your audience. They probably understand Watchmen,
Yeah.
but he is having
My mom listens. So
yeah, he like has this intimate moment with Lori, who's his girlfriend at the time, and he's just like, I don't understand what pleases you. I just wanted to be like, I just want to make you happy. And then she finds him like still doing science experiments with his like doppelganger.
Yeah.
And she storms out. Well, what I always think is fascinating about that is like later on you find out like he knows that fight's gonna happen.
Yeah.
So he still does that thing. So he's lying. Or he's not necessarily lying. He's just like, no, I'm stuck in this loop, this predeterministic loop. Everything I've done has to happen because I've seen it happen. Ergo, it has to happen. Well, anyways, I'm teaching this 3-way scene and like trying to walk my students through like, this is kind of like, how crazy is this? This guy's this incredibly powerful being. Like almost right before that, he basically says he doesn't understand that there's a difference between live bodies and dead bodies because they contain the same number of cells.
Yeah.
Which I'm like sounds smart, but it's also a very dumb statement. Of course, you can scientifically accurate, but also not accurate. Like you're like, you should know what a live person looks like. You fucking idiot.
It's the epitome of just missing the point.
Yeah,
You know,
and I
like-
think that's like his characters. Like, you know all these things, but you're not that great. Anyways, I'm like doing that. All of a sudden, the superintendent walks in. And like they're like doing an observation of my teaching, and I've just got this scene up on the board of like she's like, it tickles. It's like licking a battery. I'm like, okay, this is how I get fired. This is how my career ends on day 12.
But the cool thing is, you also get to be on a list.
Yeah, I'm sure they were like, what is he teaching those kids?
Yeah. The Watchmen scene that was always one of my favorites was the conversation that those two have where he doesn't understand like human life and emotion and love, and then he goes and he looks through her past and how, you know, even though she was created out of hatred, like that whole scene with them talking is just, it's an incredibly good way to sum up just the human experience. It's so good. It's so good.
It's a really good like primer on this optimistic nihilism that kind of runs through for that character, or this predeterminism in some ways. Like you can't understand everything that happens, all the like infinite improbabilities, and just because you can't, then that makes it like fascinating. It makes it so you're statistically a miracle.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool. But
Yeah.
it's so funny how there's certain chapters, because does that happen in chapter 9?
Oh, I can't remember the exact chapter.
I think it might be chapter 9, because chapter 6 you get Rorschach's version of that.
Yes.
Which is, nothing has any meaning except for what I decide has meaning. And you're like, oh, that's not good.
No.
That's not going to be good.
No, that's a very scary justification way of thinking.
Yeah, and that's why it was always a funny one when I would teach that book. We'd have students that'd be like, well, Rorschach is clearly the hero because he's the guy that, like, at least he does something. I'm like, but look what he does.
Yeah.
He beats up people that he says these people are pimps and pedophiles and all these things. But like, he has no evidence. He just goes in and breaks a guy's finger for making a joke about him being smelly.
Yeah.
Which we know, objectively, he's smelly.
Yeah.
It gets brought up a lot.
Eats cold beans out of a can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and the lady above him's like, you stink. I can smell you through the floorboards.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
bad.
real Dahmer situation going on there with the smelly neighbor.
Well, yeah, because you were telling me, we were talking about this on the way back from a show about how he never has this evidence, and like there's even in the scene from the movie, you're like, oh, he knew this guy was bad. He pulls the thing out of the fireplace.
Yeah.
Proof. But in the comic book, he never has any proof, and he even kind of mentions that, right?
Yeah, it's all circumstantial evidence. Like, you can assume, like, yeah, he could be right with everything that he's saying.
Yeah.
And in the comic, what he does is he changed the guy to Radiator, and is like, if you have enough time to saw your way out of these handcuffs, if you're innocent, you probably will. And then he just stands outside and waits.
Yeah.
And the guy never does. So he's like, well, that justified what I was thinking. And then it turns out it doesn't actually matter.
Yeah, it's very much if she floats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and even in the opening lines of that, you actually, in Watchmen, in his like opening speech, he talks about his dad. And he's like, like President Truman, like my dad, good men that believed in these things. And then you find out he has no idea who his dad is.
No
he never
idea.
had any idea. His dad was one of the clients of his mom. So he builds his own mythology around what he's doing from the start.
It's his character can just be summed up by self-justification.
Yeah.
That's what.
That's why he's a
is.
Rorschach test. It's what you apply to it. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Man, talking to you guys about books and like all the meaning derived from stuff, I'm like, God, books are cool when you understand them.
It's one of my favorite things about comic books is looking, because everybody can look at a comic book and be like, oh, it's just like pictures and kids stories, but there's so many of them that actually have weight to them.
Yeah.
You know. But you were saying that when a kid or somebody that you're teaching has a favorite character, you can pick a lot of things from it.
Yeah, usually I can tell like how deep they've gotten it if they really like Rorschach.
Yeah. So before you get into that, who is your favorite character?
Wow, that's a tricky one. I'm a huge fan of Dr. Manhattan because I just over the times reading it, I really realized that he is kind of this proxy character for the reader.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I got into like if you really dive into chapter 4, which is his secret origin, you start to realize like there's this cool thing that happens in it where he talks about how he's basically seeing things forward, backwards. He's living all moments in time. And you realize that's kind of what you are doing as the reader. Like you can go to any point in that book. You can go forward. You can go backward. Doesn't matter. You just can't change what's on the page.
Yeah.
And that's him. And I'm like, oh, in some ways he's this paradoxical figure of like he can do anything except or only if he's seen himself do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's incredible.
Blew my
That's
mind when
awesome.
you told me that. I was like, I want to take this class.
Yeah, it is. I'll sometimes show that metaphor to kids, and I'll take the book and like I have a copy that I broke the spine and it's like made the circle, and I was like, see, it's like his symbol, and you talk about like his symbol itself is a timeline that loops back on itself. You know, they're like, oh, it's a hydrogen atom. I have it on my arm, but like it's a hydrogen atom, but it loops back.
Yeah.
And so it's a timeline that loops back on itself, and he's both inside of it and outside of it. And it's very fascinating. And then you'll have students that'll be like, fucking, I took this class because it was comic book. You tricked me into philosophy?
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
You love learning, nerd.
Yeah.
Another funny thing about having a favorite character in the Watchmen is that none of them should be your favorite. Is like, I like them.
Yeah.
You know, like none of them are like, they're my favorite because they're a nice person.
Yeah.
Because I always liked the comedian. I saw the movie before I read it.
Yeah.
He was my very first ever experience of a hero that is a piece of shit. Like, he was my realization that, like, oh, if heroes were real, it would be him. And, like, everything about him just spoke that to me. So his character type will always be the original piece of shit hero.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and he does such a good job in the breakdown that he has, that scene. You're just like, you're kind of like, what could break this, like, inveterate piece of shit?
Yeah.
Guy that just is awful.
I need to read this.
Have you never read
I've
it?
never read it. I've
Oh,
watched the
really?
movie.
Wow. Oh, man.
Do you have a copy I could borrow?
Crazy.
Yeah, I have so many that I did not steal from the school.
That's bonkers.
Well, you didn't do it because you said you didn't.
Yeah, I didn't say it on a podcast. It's recorded.
Don't worry. No one listens.
But yeah, no. So I'll always view the comedian as the character that gave me a perception on what real life heroes would be like.
Yeah, I think that's what Watchmen does so well is these characters you feel like you can identify where you've met those kind of people.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, big time.
Because Lori is just this messed up, like she's a product of trauma from her past. Her mom has just tried to make her this golden child type thing, and she's an adrenaline junkie. Like she likens being a superhero to relapsing for her, and she's like, "Yep, I guess that's what happens. I'm back off the wagon." And then you've got Dan, who's just like, "Man, I don't feel like a man unless I'm doing this thing. Like his dick doesn't even work until he starts doing this again." And I also, as a tubby boy, I appreciate seeing my fellow brothers in Chubb fighting crime.
Yeah.
Then getting a chub.
Yeah. Well, because he saw Lori.
Yeah.
Get it?
Yeah. So what are some first impressions, like, because you've seen so many people like come to realization with these characters, and when they do pick favorites, what are some of your favorite things you've picked out from other people kind of figuring it out or picking favorites along the way?
I loved, so I had this one student, it was my first year teaching, and we were doing this discussion, and he's like, hey, Mr. Eggleston. I was like, yeah. And he goes, are heroes shit? And it's like the look on his face of like, oh no, you've ruined something I believe.
Yeah.
Oh no.
And I was like, yeah, kind of is the moral. And he's like, okay.
Yeah. You rented a veil.
Yeah. And I was just like, well, that sucks now, but like, think in a few years, you're not going to be hopefully tricked by like a politician or something. Or
Which
you're not gonna
is, yeah, you did him a favor. It sucks at the moment, but it's like,
Yeah.
that's like finding out Santa beats his wife.
Damn. Merry Christmas, everybody.
the presents must flow.
Well, the funny thing is like, would you rather learn from a comic book, or I know a bunch of my friends in middle school and high school as I was growing up, like they were really into sports. Obviously, I was not, but they were really into sports, and they would always be so heartbroken when some article or something would come out about their favorite or one of the athletes is just a total scumbag.
Yeah,
because as a kid, you see athletes as like these fantastic people, like your Michael Jordans and stuff like that. But like,
Sorry, just remembering that Michael Jordan's gambling was so bad his dad got murdered. Like,
right, like,
don't worry though, he was in Space Jam.
exactly. But like you look at these people, and they are like the real life heroes. So you're gonna find out one way or another. You know?
And it makes sense that sports figures specifically are more prone to that, because they're usually good at sports at like 10, and they start getting special treatment and getting kind of whatever they want, and then at 18, 19 they get millions of dollars. Like, it's wild that all of them aren't trash.
Yeah. Well, and it's I think it's also really funny to me to watch students when they're kind of seeing this for the first time and then like applying it, and like, yeah, you shouldn't trust any authority.
Yeah,
that's not saying authority is necessarily wrong, but it's like,
they should be questioned.
Blind trust.
Yeah, like, hey, guess what? Your teachers, we've probably lied to you at some point.
Yeah,
probably because not necessarily maliciously, but I'm like, dude, we could have told you in like third grade about the shit Columbus did, or we could have you just memorize a bad song.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
like, we know which one is going to be quicker and not get your parents mad at me.
Yeah.
There's also a very delicate timing to everything, too.
Yeah.
Like, a third grader doesn't need to know that.
Yeah.
No,
Like,
because they'll be smoking by 5th grade.
yeah, right.
Yeah, it'd just be like a French philosopher, like, nothing has any meaning.
Yeah. Oh, man. But yeah.
Death is a relief. Yeah, I also think what was always funny to me too is Watchmen didn't ever dull my love of like the traditional superheroes, like I'm a huge Superman guy. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people are like, well, how can you read Watchmen and then read Superman and not view Superman as just like this little kiddie version? I'm like, oh, to me it made always Superman more interesting, because I'm like, you all start to realize his superpower is actually just like that morality, that like essentially good core, because he has all the powers of a god. And it's actually fascinating to me when you read Watchmen. One of the other realizations I had a student have was like, we're really glad, because we always had the conversation, do you think Dr. Manhattan could change something that he did? And they'd be like, probably, but we're really glad he doesn't.
Okay.
And you're like, yeah, then he would realize that he is omnipotent, and that would be a problem. Like, you just basically have a tyrant of your universe.
Yeah. And it would be anything he didn't like wouldn't.
Yeah.
And and he's also a guy that, like, again, does not understand the difference between life and death. He's like, it's unquantifiable, and you're like, it's fucking moving, not moving.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right. That's the basics.
Yeah.
It's apples and oranges, which you can't actually compare. To be honest.
That's why we invented metaphors, John. But like, they'd be like, oh yeah, we shouldn't have that, or we shouldn't. And I'm like, yeah, that's the problem. And then there's like a line in Watchmen where he's like, I think I've understood the value of human life. I'm going to go make some. And I'm like, we should
Yeah.
all be like, oh, no, that's not good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
because that's because in the movie it was like I'm gonna go make some life of my own, and because in the book it's I'm gonna make human life, isn't it?
Yeah. He's pretty clear he's going to go make people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Which
Which, did you watch the HBO series?
I did.
afterwards?
I did
did.
not.
You didn't.
I
No,
did. I liked.
I got a couple
loved it.
episodes in and then got distracted, if I'm being honest.
I'm going to tell you, dude, it is worth it.
I loved it, yeah.
As a person that put it off for so long about like, oh no, nothing can do. I watched it and I was like, okay, it feels in my mind like it understood Watchmen better than the movie version does.
Okay. So I'm a bit hazy because it has been a minute. Is this like a replacement for Watchmen? Is this a continuation? Like, where does it kind of fall?
It's a sequel.
Okay.
It's set in, I want to say Texas,
Okay.
or Oklahoma.
Yeah,
So a sequel to the movie.
It's a sequel to the book.
The book.
yeah.
Okay, cool,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, which is kind of cool.
which I learned a thing that the movie didn't do was do a big squid
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. The squid. Are you team squid or are you team
team bomb.
CGI explosion?
I honestly don't know. I've never been asked this question. You really put me on the spot
man.
here.
So I'd like from watching the show, learning the squid, I enjoy the squid fits more of the theme of the show.
Yeah.
Or the theme of the book. Like it's like things are ridiculous in this world.
Yeah.
You need a ridiculous enemy.
Yeah. The whole idea is Veidt decides to drop a telekinetically charged brain or telepathically charged brain on New York City, targeting just New York City in the book. It's a giant squid that he uses the ability to it phases into New York.
Yep.
Kills a bunch of people. The movie instead does, 300 million people or something like that over a bunch of different cities. And it all,
I thought it was just New York.
in the movie, he hits a bunch of cities. That's why I think Zack Snyder didn't maybe understand modern American history, because like I view Watchmen as such a good 9/11 parable. If you told me like the great American novel about 9/11 was written in 1986, I'd call you a liar, and then I'd read Watchmen and I'd be like,
Oh, yeah.
maybe,
Yeah.
Because I think what he forgot is he uses it as this like, well, everyone comes together thing at the end of his movie. And I'm like, it wouldn't work that way. The people would be like, that guy was America's lapdog, Dr. Manhattan, that bombed us.
Yeah.
Like, because think, what did we do 9/11? We were like, oh, we came together for like a week and we're like, never again, let's put flags everywhere.
Yeah.
And then we're like, also, we're going to have to kick somebody's ass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they went after we went after Iraq, Afghanistan, like all these things to try to like get back at them. That's what would happen with America.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
none of these countries would just be like, yeah, we gotta chill.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I think he kind of missed what I think would actually happen there.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, the arms race though. Like you can't bomb him. He could bomb you. So
Yeah, and that's what they're trying to say. But one of the excerpts from Watchmen was it's like this little thing about how the Russians, and it's Alan Moore's writing, so it's not like it's true, but the idea for Russia is we were so devastated post World War II because of World War II, we've decided never again would we let Russia be weak like this. So they will be like, we'll nuke the shit out of things just to never be weak.
yeah.
And I'm like, I think that mentality carried through in Watchmen, where he had to present this extra dimensional threat, this thing that's not human, and it's not man caused,
Yeah.
to try to unite people. Whereas in the movie, I think he ignores that and it's like, well, because Dr. Manhattan's there, like keeping the watchful eye, nobody will try anything. And I'm like, I don't think that will work.
Yeah.
I don't think that'll last nearly as long.
No, I think if anything, it would create people doubling down
Yeah.
to try and get like over it quicker, but it would just lead to absolute destruction.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But
Yes. I didn't mean to take your guys' very fun podcast.
No,
this is
this is
exactly
shit.
this is exactly what I wanted.
Yeah, I adore these kinds of like conversations regarding like comic books and books and movies.
Yeah.
Like I could probably do the exact same thing you did with Watchmen, but for V for Vendetta. Like that book, comic book, that whole thing is just it's all my favorite stuff.
It's also the shame of, I think, Alan Moore, in a certain way where I'm like, man, you have some works that I just consider so powerful and good, because I love his Watchmen. I love. Did you ever read his run on Miracle Man?
I've actually only read Watchmen from him.
Okay. Well, you read V for Vendetta. That's more.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So he did this before he does Watchmen. He does Miracle Man, which is this British hero from like the 40s or 50s. That's very clearly a ripoff of Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
But he updates it, and like in the update, this guy realizes he's Miracle Man, and he also is like starts to remember that he had a kid sidekick, and he realizes that kid sidekick is now grown up, and what he finds out is he's bonded with this alien entity that they basically trade dimensions, they trade bodies. So he's like, hey, this guy that was my kid sidekick is not actually the kid. He's the alien entity, like swapped bodies.
Okay.
And the guy tries to kill him. And as it happens, like there's a couple things that happen. He finally like beats him and gets him to switch bodies with the little kid again. So they take the little kid and they put him in a foster home. And he gets beat mercilessly and molested and stuff. Yeah, it's very dark. And he like says the magic words to turn back into Kid Miracle Man, and he goes on this crazy rampage through London where it's just, I mean, I just remember there's a scene with like heads on clotheslines, and they talk about this, like the history books will say that like mercifully the history books will say the first car they threw was empty.
Oh God,
that's a lie, and you're like, oh, it's bad, and then it just ends with him like holding the little kid because he gets him to turn back, and he's just like, hey, it's okay, and then he just breaks his neck.
I need to read that.
It also has this like weird birth scene where you're like, oh, could you make it like the scene from Knocked Up but just in comic book form, and you're like, oh, this is gross, I don't like this.
Yeah.
I need to read that.
That's not where I wanted to see vagina.
No, I love the dark and gritty stuff. Like it's some of my favorite stuff ever.
Well, that's why a lot of my favorite comic books that I'm reading are like small. They're not DC, not Marvel, like even Dark Horse to an extent. Like it's the smaller independent stuff because they're willing to do these darker stories.
Yeah. I love a dark story. I hate an over the top dark story.
Oh yeah. Like so I love The Boys. The show's doing so much better than the comic. The comic was just like, we're edgy to be edgy.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, you'd have a moment where you're like, "Oh, this gets it," but then there's sometimes they're like, "I'm like, you're just mean. You're a mean-spirited man."
Yes, that's exactly. It feels The Boys does feel mean. Like that is exactly a good point.
I think for me, Berserk hovers that fine line of like, I'm gonna have to skip this chapter because this is just there's nothing okay about it. You know. Have you guys ever read Berserk?
I remember I rented from Blockbuster Video because I'm not an anime fan. I'm not a manga fan.
Okay.
I remember renting it once from Blockbuster Video because like a friend's like, you have to check this out, and I watched it, and I was like, no, I got to tell my mom about what I did. You need to never talk about it again.
That is 1/10 of the book.
Yeah,
it's insanity.
Oh, I remember.
And you know it's a lot if I say it's
yeah. I remember I was getting a tattoo done, and this guy was getting a full back piece of was it Griffin's Sacrifice?
Okay.
Of the what's the group?
Oh my gosh, I can't remember.
Is it the Band of the Hawk?
I think so. Yeah. Why can't I remember?
Yeah, and it's just like I'm like, dude, you know tattoos are permanent, right? Like,
I'm so lost. I'm terrified.
Like
and lost.
This character's like to get this power, he has all of his friends, like everyone that he's loved or has been loyal to. He just basically sacrifices them to a bunch of demons, and they like are butchered horribly or raped to death.
Yep.
And this guy's like, I'm gonna get that on my back. I'm like, you
should not.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I'm not allowed to wear shirts anymore. No, I'm only allowed to wear shirts. Only allowed to wear shirts.
Yeah. I was just like, dude, that's what were you covering up?
Yeah, no joke. But Berserk is definitely one of those where it's like once you read it once, you'll never want to open that book again. You're like, I've experienced it. We're moving on.
And that's going to do it for us this week, guys. Check us out again on Tuesday. We'll have another episode for you. Thank you again, Cavin Eggleston, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. I adored the conversation about the Watchmen. I thought it was amazing.
We're going to have you back for sure. Where can we find you on the internet?
You can find me at cavineggleston.com or on any of the social medias at Cavin_egg.
Nice.
Right on. Yep.
You can find us at the White Rabbit Cabaret for Monster, a live play D&D experience unlike anything in Indianapolis. So if you're in the area, come on out. It's going to be so much fun. We got us three are on it, and then we have Brian Petrie and Mo Mitchell are going to be joining us as special guests. It's going to be so much fun. So get your tickets, get your suggestions for NPC names, for item names, magic crits, crits, fails, misses. We want you guys to be a part of this as much as we are.
And if you find us on the internet as Nerd News, we're going to be posting everywhere once we get a poster where you can get tickets, where you can it's going to be a big thing. We're so excited.
Yeah,
we're so
it's
excited.
going to be so much fun. And you can find us on the internet. Just look up the Nerd News Network. If you want to see me do stand-up, check me out at TysonCoxComedy.com. I have my dates and stuff on there. Other than that, thank you very much, guys. We'll leave a 5-star review. If you leave a 5-star review, we will read it. And we do appreciate those. They mean more than you know, because we are just a couple of scrappy brats trying to make the internet a nerdier place.
Yeah. Yep. Oh man. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. We appreciate each and every one of you. You guys are our advertising, and we couldn't do this without you. Thank you all, everybody.